Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Tuesday. I nearly went to say it's Monday then because I was off work yesterday. It isn't Monday, it is Tuesday here in the UK. Bank holiday weekend in the UK, or bank holiday week really, isn't it? Because Thursday and Friday are bank holidays as well. I hope you all are doing really well. Now originally we were going to come on here today and talk about the seasonal player ratings, and that is still a live stream that we are going to do over the coming days or so. We done it last year. I think we might have done it the year before as well. Basically a live stream where we sit down and we rate every single player in the Everton squad from a 1 to a 10 on how their season was as a whole, taking in the entire season, the games they played, their performances, whether or not they got better towards the end of the season, whether or not they started well and then tailed off. There's a number of Everton players that fit in those different categories, and that was going to be the scene that we were going to sit down and do today. I had it all planned out, made some notes on it, and then all of a sudden there was an interview yesterday that was leaked to the world via social media and via Twitter, and Sky Sports reported on it and all of that, of Richarlison talking in a press conference whilst on international duty with Brazil about his Everton future, and I thought it would be remiss of me really to come on here and do a live stream and not speak about this subject, not speak about this topic, especially after what we spoke about on Sunday night, which was the rumours linking Richarlison with a move to Real Madrid. We spoke about how at the current moment it seems like Real Madrid aren't particularly interested in Richarlison, but we spoke about him as a player and the likelihood that he'll still be an Everton player at the end of the season, and all of these different variables. And this was before Richarlison himself had come out and said anything about his future and whether or not that will be at Everton Football Club. So I thought, you know what, today we'll sit down, we'll talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk about Frank Lampard. He has been officially fined £30,000 by the FA today for basically coming out and calling out referees for being bad at their job. Referees seem to be the only people in the world of football who cannot be criticised. You're not allowed to criticise them. You're not allowed to say that they make bad decisions. You're not allowed to say that they're not great at their job. The media can scrutinise and criticise players. They can scrutinise and criticise managers. They can scrutinise and criticise fans. But as soon as you mention anything about a referee, that's it. You're immediately fined. You're not allowed to say that they are untouchable, despite the fact that in the whole sport of football, they are by far the worst profession within football in terms of how bad they are at their job and how much they get away with it as well. But we'll talk a little bit more about that, and we'll read the official statement from the FA a little bit later on in the video. But as I said, typically at the end of the season, you'd like to have a week or two where there's been not much news. And to be fair, last week we didn't upload many videos. We obviously had the review to the Arsenal game, and other than that, there wasn't much content on the channel. And I explained on Sunday that we'd had a little bit of a break because it had been quite a heavy season and there'd been a lot going on, especially over the last 5, 6, 7 weeks or so, and there wasn't an awful lot to talk about last week. And it would have been nice to have 2 or 3 weeks where there's not really an awful lot to talk about. It would have been nice to have 2 or 3 weeks where we're sitting here and Everton aren't really in our minds. We're not really thinking about it, but that's never the case, is it? It wasn't the case last year. The season literally finished and Carlo Ancelotti decided to leave, and then we were in the hunt for a new manager for the entire summer. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be the case this season either, as Richarlison has come out and done a little bit of an interview, which has left, I think, every Evertonian scratching their head as to what the future holds for him and whether or not that is as an Everton player. So before we get into any of the discussion surrounding this, let's go through some of the things that were mentioned in the interview. Now, I think it's important to understand as well that this wasn't a specific interview given on his Everton future. He's not done what other players have done in the past, namely, off the top of my head, Romelu Lukaku, and come out and done an interview addressing his Everton future solely. He's had a press conference with Brazil because he's on international duty with Brazil, and a couple of the questions that he was asked during that press conference was about Everton Football Club. So he's not come out and done an interview or done a press conference specifically about Everton and his future and wanting to stay or wanting to leave. He's had a press conference that I dare say he was asked many more questions about Brazil and the team and how they're feeling ahead of the coming games, etc. But a couple of the questions he was asked were about Everton as well. I think that's important to gauge the context of this situation, because when you see you know, when you're speaking to somebody or when you go on Twitter and social media and you see people saying, oh, Richarlison's done an interview talking about his Everton future, you automatically think, well, why is he coming out and doing an interview talking about his future at the football club? What does that mean he's going to leave? Does that mean he wants to leave? Why would he specifically come out and do that? But he hasn't. He's done a press conference with Brazil, and within that press conference, he's spoken about his Everton future. So just a couple of the quotes that were taken from that interview. Now, obviously, these have been roughly translated. The interview, of course, was in Portuguese, because that is the language in which he speaks. The press conference was in Portuguese. I've watched the press conference with subtitles, and of course, as with anything, it's loose translation. And you know, again, when we first read these comments and when we first seen these quotes from Richarlison, they were given with very little context whatsoever. We then later got to see the actual press conference, and there was a bit more context involved then. But firstly, as I said, he's talking about, you know, Brazil and being away with Brazil, and he was asked a direct question about Everton. He said, I've already made it clear to the board. I've already talked to Frank Lampard too with my agents, and they know what I want. Let's wait for June. Now I can't talk, because when we talk about leaving a club, I'm kind of like this because of the history I have at Everton, the affection that the fans have for me. When we talk about leaving, I am a little speechless. Now, that was reported by Globo Esporte, who I believe are a Brazilian publication. Now, that might be wrong, but they're a publication that reports on Brazilian football, certainly, because they've spoken a little bit about Richarlison before in different capacities. Now, that was put out there the way through yesterday afternoon. I was sitting with Ned and Paige at the time, and all of a sudden you go on Twitter and bang, here's this quote from Richarlison. We don't know where it's come from. We don't know whether it's come from a direct interview that he's had about Everton, whether it's come from an interview he's had with Brazil. It seemed very out of context at the time, because it seems by those two quotes like he's effectively saying he's leaving, doesn't it? Because he talks about, you know, now I cannot talk because when we talk about leaving a club, I'm kind of like this. Now, without any context or without any sort of, you know, past or present, sort of video footage of where this has come from, that very much seems like he's coming out and saying, well, I want to leave Everton, because he says, now I can't talk because when we talk about leaving a club, I'm kind of like this. So the assumption is, well, this is him saying he wants to leave Everton. He's also said, I've made it clear to the board and I've talked to Frank Lampard. They know what I want. Let's wait for June. But it was always, for me, going to be a case of, well, there's clearly a little bit of mistranslation, and there's clearly a lack of context with this. So let's actually wait and see where this has come from and in what context it's come from as well. And we got that a little bit later on in the evening. A couple of hours later, Sky had put the press conference up, and the press conference is being shared all over social media, in which he was asked the direct question about Everton and about his situation and about what he wants to do and where he wants to go, etc. He then, after actually saying, I've made myself clear to the board, I have talked with Frank Lampard too, he knows what I want, the reporter actually asks him, we'll go through and we'll talk about what he says. Oh, let's not play the audio. So he said, when we talk about changing clubs, it's a little complicated due to the history I have at Everton. The fans like me a lot, and when there are these talks about changing clubs, I feel like that I don't have anything to say. He then said, but I've made myself clear to the board. I've talked with Everton head coach Frank Lampard as well. He knows what I want. And then I believe he said, then he said, but so no matter what happens, it won't disturb me at the national team. It won't be a problem at the World Cup. And then he said, I'm totally focused at football. So no matter where I am, I'll be playing my football with joy. He was then, I believe, asked by the reporter that said, so it seems that you wish to stay there, the reporter said, and he said, we will see, with a massive smile on his face. Let's wait this month. I am focused here at the national team now, and let's wait for this month. The talk with my staff and Everton's board to see what they will decide. So, again, a little bit more context to the situation there in regards to Richarlison is that, again, even just something so small as the reporter saying, so it looks like you will stay there, and him with a smile on his face saying, we will see, it sort of conflicts with what I think a lot of Evertonians were thinking earlier on in the day, which was, it almost seems like he wants to leave, and that's his decision that has been made. Now, Fabrizio Romano, who of course is quite a reliable journalist and quite a reliable source, did tweet out yesterday that Richarlison has new agents, and he's had them since April because he's open for a summer move. Many clubs are exploiting this possibility, and then Fabrizio Romano re-quoted the quote from Global Esporte. But again, after the interview was put out there, and after the full press conference was put out, and we got to see the context in which the question was asked and the reaction of Richarlison and how he answered it didn't really scream, I'm leaving Everton Football Club this summer. Now, it also didn't really scream, I'm staying at Everton Football Club this summer either. So it is a little bit difficult to sort of understand and, I suppose, decipher what Richarlison means by what he's saying and how, to try and gauge how he's feeling and where his head's at with the situation. There was then a lot of rumours, unconfirmed rumours surrounding Richarlison going around on Twitter and stuff yesterday and early today about the fact that it may be a case of that he's after a new contract, and it's not a case of wanting to move on whatsoever. It's a case of effectively saying to the board, I want a new contract, I want a little bit of a pay rise, and I want to basically be given certain assurances as to my future, as to the future of Everton, as to where we're going to be before I sign said new contract. And as I said, those are obviously all unconfirmed rumours, but those were things that were floating about Twitter. There was also some unconfirmed rumours about Richarlison recently buying a new home in the Formby area and moving his family over here, and them all being very, very settled and very, very happy. And this whole situation has stemmed from basically similar to what I've just said, and wanting a new deal, wanting a little bit of a pay rise, wanting certain assurances, but he would be open to a move if, quote, super clubs were to come in for him. Now, as I said, anything other than what Fabrizio Romano has said and what has come directly from Richarlison's mouth in that press conference, anything else that you read or you see is just purely speculation. Could be complete and utter bollocks, could be the truth. We'll wait and see, and I'm sure over the coming weeks and months we'll be able to decipher what is true and what isn't true by whatever happens. But I don't think it's out the realms of possibility, and I don't think this interview is too dissimilar to a player who is effectively saying, almost to the Everton board, listen, this is what I want. Can you match this? If you can't, then I may have to leave. If you can, then I'm settled, I'm happy, and I'm willing to stay. It's not a case of, yeah, I'm definitely going, I want to leave. But it also isn't a case of, well, I'm definitely staying. It's almost like, well, a decision hasn't been made yet, but if the club can provide me with X, Y, and Z, then I'm happy to stay because I'm comfortable here. Richarlison's spoken about being comfortable here, feeling like he's at home, feeling like Everton is at home. I think he even compared being here to being at home in Brazil in the way in which he feels and the way in which he's settled into the city and the football club. And again, the rumours that are at this moment just rumours and could be complete and utter nonsense about only being interested if super clubs come in, again, I feel could potentially be the truth. I said on Sunday, and I think I've said for a while now, if Richarlison is to leave this summer, I don't think it will be to just a standard great, good Premier League team. I don't think he'd go to a Tottenham. I don't think he'd go to a Man United. I don't think he'd go to an Arsenal. Okay, maybe if a Manchester City come in or a Chelsea, then that's a different situation because those are teams fighting at the very top of European football and fighting for league titles. Liverpool, obviously, let's be honest, he's never going to Liverpool. But I've said for a while now, I think if Richarlison is to leave Everton this summer, it will be for a PSG, it will be for a Real Madrid, it will be for a team that he can't really afford to turn down, and Everton can't really afford to stop that move from happening. Now, obviously, since that press conference, again, the news, specifically the Mail, who have linked Everton with about 42,000 players over the last week or so take this with a massive pinch of salt. But the Mail reported yesterday, after that press conference, that PSG will not be moving for Richarlison. They will be looking elsewhere at cheaper options. However, there is interest from Tottenham, Chelsea and Arsenal. As I said, I wouldn't particularly take that as solid. They also said that Manchester City have an interest in Jared Brandthwaite. So, again, make of that what you will. And this isn't by any sense of the imagination me saying that Richarlison wouldn't move to an Arsenal or a Manchester United or a Tottenham, but I just don't think that his desire will be any of those clubs. I honestly think that the press conference, and this might just be me being naive and me, having a lot of love and affection for Richarlison and not being able to see past that. I don't know, but I honestly think that what he said is more of a, this is what I want. Can you provide me with it? And that might be a bit higher wages. That might be better goal bonuses. That might be assurances about his future or the future of Everton, which are difficult to provide because of where we've just finished in the league and the fact that, you know, it should never have been like that. It might be other things, but I don't think it specifically sounds like I'm getting off, you know, this transfer window sort of conversation. But again, that might just be blind naivety by me. Listen, football is a brutal sport. We saw that this time last year with Carlo Ancelotti. If you'd said to me on the 31st of May 2021, Carlo Ancelotti was going to get off and go back to Real Madrid, I'd have laughed at you and said, no chance, he loves it here, he loves the fans, we love him, you know, he loves it in Crosby. And yet on the 31st, the 30th of June, whatever, you know, a month later, he was back in Real Madrid and we were on a search for the new manager. So whilst I understand that footballers and managers and people around football have got very little sort of, you know, again, although I'm not saying Richarlison is this way, but a lot of footballers say a lot of things and then go against it if something else pops up. I understand that, but I just don't think that this is the case with Richarlison. I don't, and I might be wrong. And if I am wrong, then I'll have to accept that. But I honestly think Richarlison understands and appreciates his connection with this football club, and I don't think he'd give that up to move to a team that, even if they are in a better position than Everton, are in okay, I'm not saying Man United are only in a slightly better position than Everton, because the club, the stature of Manchester United is, you know, a different story, but or at Tottenham or at Arsenal, etc. But I honestly think it would take a super club to sort of move Richarlison out of Everton, or to at least change his mind. But part of these conversations that Richarlison and his agents and his team are having with the board may be the board saying, well, listen, if somebody comes in with a 50-60 million pound bid, regardless of who it is, whether it's Tottenham, whether it's Arsenal, whether it's PSG, we can't afford to turn that money down. For you, we need, you know, with the financial situation we're in, we would need to accept that. Hopefully that isn't the case, because Richarlison is a player who I firmly believe Everton should be building the team around for years and years to come, and I think Frank Lampard will want to do that as well. And he certainly has got everything he needs to become an Everton legend. He loves this football club as much as any of us. He's a proper Evertonian. He works his bollocks off. He's talented. Yes, he could get better in certain areas. Yes, he didn't have a great season goal scoring wise last season, but he's got it all there to be a top player. But again, you know, it's football, and that doesn't guarantee anything. And, you know, as I said, it is a little bit, you know, it's not a nice situation, because we're all sort of sitting here, aren't we, thinking, well, what's going on? We had that yesterday. It's almost like when you're watching a movie or a television programme and they show you, you know, a bit of a cliffhanger, and then they just sort of leave you hanging there for the next episode or for the next film or whatever, and you're sort of just sitting there going, well, what happens now? We know that could have happened, but did it happen, or did something else happen? Where are we with it? And it almost feels like that with this situation at the moment, doesn't it? Richarlison did tweet out a video of him celebrating, I think it was his goal against Chelsea, and doing that with the badge and a fire emoji. But again, that could be him as much as saying, don't worry, I'm staying and I want to stay, and this is about a new contract rather than me moving on. Or it could be him as much saying, listen, I want to move on, but I love the football club, and this is, you know, I want you all to know that. Ultimately, we won't know until we hear more, and I'm sure, I don't think a decision has been made, because I think if a decision had been made, we'd have heard about it. I don't think this is going to be a case of us waking up one day and all of a sudden Richarlison's left Everton Football Club and we're all sort of saying, what's going on here? I think we'll know definitively at some point what his decision is, i.e., right, he's wanting a new contract and the club are trying to figure that out, or right, he's wanting to go and the club are going to be looking at you know, at bids and at offers for him. But ultimately, as I said, and I get this question a lot, you know, would you move him on? Would you want to move him on? Listen, I've said openly a number of times, I love Richarlison. I think he's absolutely amazing. He's my favourite Everton player, and I promised myself, after Mikel Arteta, after Wayne Rooney, after Ross Barkley, after Tim Cahill, after Leighton Baines, I would never fall in love with another Everton player. But it will break my heart the day that this kid leaves Everton Football Club. It really, really will. Now, whether that's this summer, whether that's next summer, whether that's in 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But it will absolutely break my heart the day that he leaves Everton. But as I said on Sunday, if a team like PSG, Real Madrid was to come in for him, and I know the rumours at the moment are stating that those teams aren't really interested in him, but as I said, I wouldn't listen too much to the rumours at the minute, because a lot of them will just be made up nonsense from journalists who've got nothing better to do other than make something up to try and get a few clicks. But you know, it would be disappointing to see him move to another team in the Premier League. But that might be out of his control. It's certainly out of our control as a fan base. As I said, Everton might be looking at it and thinking, listen, you know, we want to keep you on, we love you, but if we get a bit of silly money for you, even if it is from somebody in the Premier League, then financially it's better to move you on. We don't know. We don't know where Everton's stance is on it. I think, personally, judging from this press conference, and this is just my personal opinion, this could be wrong, this could be me completely misreading the situation, but I think from my personal opinion, the press conference doesn't necessarily sound like I want to leave Everton. It almost sounds like I've got this that I want, and this that I want to be assured. And if Everton can assure me that, then I'm happy to sign and I'm happy to stay. If Everton can't assure me that, then I may have to move on. But, you know, again, you were hearing a lot of rumours on social media that may just be complete and utter nonsense. They may have some substance to them. If they have got some substance to them, for example, the one about him buying a new home in the Formby area, again, that might be utter bollocks. But if it isn't utter bollocks and it's true, then why would he buy a new home in this area if he's looking for a transfer? You know, surely that would indicate he'd be looking for a new contract, and he just wants the club to guarantee certain things. I don't know. As I said, that might be utter nonsense. But one thing's for sure is, I think, don't get me wrong, I don't speak for every Evertonian. I think a lot of Evertonians would probably agree with what I'm about to say. A lot of people wouldn't, but if it is a case of a new contract, if it is a case of a pay rise, if it is a case of a higher goal bonus, if it is a case of certain things that we can guarantee him, then just give it to him. Give it to him, because there's not many players in this current squad that care about Everton as much as this lad. Yes, you can look at Anthony Gordon. It's easier for Anthony Gordon. I'm not taking anything away from Anthony Gordon. He's brilliant. I love him, and I think he's been fantastic this season, and he deserves a lot of credit. And that's a conversation for a different video. But it's easier for Anthony Gordon. He's grown up in and around the city. You know, he's grown up in Everton, and he's been at the football club since he was, 8-9 years old. He knows what it means to play in Merseyside derbies. He knows what it means to love this football club, to fight for this club, to sit at Goodison Park and watch Everton. He knows all of that. You know, he went to the same school as me. You know, 15 minutes, 10 minutes down the road from Goodison Park. He grew up 5-10 minutes from me. I was in the school at the same time as Anthony Gordon. I remember Anthony Gordon in school. It's easier for Anthony Gordon to embrace the culture of Everton Football Club. It's not as easy for Richarlison, who's a young lad who's come over from Brazil. He's been through his own personal struggles, which, you know, we all know about. We've all seen the interviews. We've all seen the pieces that have been done on Richarlison and his childhood in Brazil. He come over and initially played for Watford in London, again, at a completely different society, a completely different situation to what Liverpool as a city is, a completely different way of living, a completely different, just place in general. He's then moved to the city, and he's really embraced this football club. And as I said on Sunday, and I still stick with, if you didn't know anything about football, and you didn't know anything about Richarlison or about Everton, and you spoke to Richarlison, other than the blatant accent and language difference, just on what he had to say about Everton and his feelings about Everton, you would swear that he'd grown up 5 minutes down the road from Goodison, and he'd supported this football club all of his life, and he come from a family who supported this football club all his life. That's how much this means to him. That's how much he cares. That's how much he loves Everton, and that's how much we love him back as well. So to hear him even mention in a sentence the possibility of leaving Everton is obviously gut-wrenching for all of us. And as I said, if it's a case of I just want a new contract, I just want assurances, then for me, and some people might say don't be silly, Cam, because his quality, if we can get big money for him, then we can get a better value player for cheaper or whatever, or we're not in the situation financially, whatever. Some people will have counter arguments for this, and that's fine. Some people will be able to look with the blue tinted glasses off, and that's absolutely fine. But for me, the way I look at it, if it's feasible to give him what he wants, and we can do that, and he just wants a couple of new guarantees and some more money, then just give it to him. Give it to him, because as I said, he is the type of player that we should be building the team around. Somebody who cares, somebody who's clearly talented, somebody that over the last, 4 or 5 months of the season was one of few players. And I'm not talking about, the last few weeks of the season when they all picked themselves up and they all decided to actually give a shit for once. I'm not talking about that period, because a lot of players stepped up in that period. I'm talking about even before that, 2-3 months before that, when a lot of this playing squad almost seemed like they'd given up, almost seemed like they'd accepted defeat, almost seemed like they'd accepted relegation and failure. Richarlison was one of the only ones that every single game you could see wasn't having it, and was picking players up and was dragging players through games and was working hard and was battling and was fighting for the shirt. That says a lot about his character. And let's be honest as well, he's come up with some big goals this season. His goal against Chelsea was a massive goal. It was the only goal in that game, the game that we won. And we've spoken a lot about Jordan Pickford, and we spoke about him a lot on Sunday because he won, obviously, Player of the Year, and his save, won save of the season against Azpilicueta, but it was Richarlison's goal that ultimately won us that game. His goal against Crystal Palace got us back in the game, made it 2-2. If it wasn't for that goal, we'd have only drawn that game, and there'd have been a lot more anxiety around the club at the time. He effectively scored against Brentford as well, didn't he? But obviously Dominic Calvert-Lewin ended up taking the credit for that. Scored the penalty. He scored some important goals this season. He hasn't had a great season individually. He hasn't had a great goal-scoring season, but the goals he scored have been important, and in important games and at important times. And just look at how he celebrated Alex Iwobi's goal against Newcastle. He went off injured. He was sat on the bench and he ran pretty much the entire length of the pitch to go and celebrate with the rest of his teammates, despite the fact he wasn't even on the field at the time. It will break my heart when this lad leaves Everton. And I suppose we can all only hope that it won't be this summer. Whether it will be or not is to be seen. And I'm sure we will wait and see. And I'm sure we'll hear more in the very near future about these comments and about what they mean and what they were in reference to, and whether or not it's a new contract or whether or not it's just a case of him wanting to leave the football club. And we'll also see, his desire in terms of if his decision is to leave. Is it I just want to leave because I want to play European football, in which opens the door to an Arsenal, a Tottenham, a Man United? Is it I want to leave because I want to go and play at the high level, in which it might only open the door to a couple of super clubs, as per se, which is some of the rumours that we're hearing on social media. This is all information that we'll wait and see. But look, I think one thing I would say, and I've seen a lot on social media over the last 24 hours, is don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. If he does leave, and it will be heartbreaking, and I don't think any Evertonian will have any ill feeling towards Richarlison if he is to leave. But if he does leave, it's not the end of the world. It's a massive, massive, massive miss, and he is a ridiculously important player to replace, not only for his ability as goals that he scores, because let's be honest, this team isn't full of goals whatsoever. There's only a couple of players that score in this team, and he is one of the main ones. So his goals will be key to replace, but also his attitude, his desire, his commitment, his effort, his passion, his personality, all things that will be extremely difficult to replace if he is to leave. But it's not the end of the world. I'm sure Frank Lampard will be able to hopefully replace that, and I know that's easier said than done because we still haven't replaced Romelu Lukaku after he left 4 or 5 years ago. But football plods on, players come, players go, and we'll have to move on. One thing I would say is we'd have a ridiculous amount of money in our pocket, because I don't think this club would sell Richarlison for anything under what we deem he's worth, and for me that's over £70 million. You might laugh at me and say, that's a nonsense, but it's not about what he's worth in terms of his goals or his assists or statistically. It's about what he's worth to Everton and how many players are like Richarlison in this team. So yeah, it's one of them. We'll wait and see. As I said, originally when we first read the quotes, it was a little bit, well, hang on, what does he mean by that? We then obviously got the full press conference and the context in which the quotes and the words were said, and then all of a sudden starts to put it into a bit more context. He wasn't just talking about Everton, he was talking about, he had the press conference and he was asked a question, so he answered it. It was also roughly translated. Some people will take a lot from his facial expression when he was asked whether he'll be at Everton next season, the smile, the laugh. Some people will say that doesn't mean anything. We'll wait and see. But That's the latest. He's spoken about it. He's been quite open with it as well. He obviously hasn't. He said the club and Frank Lampard knows what he wants. He hasn't told us what he wants. But again, we might be sitting here in 2 or 3 weeks' time talking about a new Richarlison contract, and all of this will be irrelevant. But yeah, it's certainly it's not a very nice time to be an Evertonian. But it hasn't been a very nice time to be an Evertonian for the last year, has it really? Let's be honest. The last year has been an absolute shit show. But it just adds a little bit more anxiety on top of things we don't already need. But I wouldn't worry about it, because, listen, it is what it is, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks, I assume. But anyway, yeah, look, before we go on to talking about Frank Lampard, let's have a look at some transfer rumours. So as I said, the Mail reporting that Manchester City have an interest in Jarrad Branthwaite. I don't particularly believe that, to be honest with you, but they may have an interest in him. If they do have an interest in him, again, it will be difficult for Everton to convince Jarrad Branthwaite to not go to Manchester City, but he might look at it and think, I'd rather stay here at Everton, because I'm more likely to break into the first team and be a consistent starter than I am if I go to Manchester City. Manchester City sign centre-backs for 50, 60 million who never play games. Never mind a young lad who, as we've seen in recent weeks, isn't ready to be a Premier League starter yet. But we'll wait and see on that one. As I said, I don't think there's anything in it whatsoever. Been a few rumours about Duncan Ferguson recently, and whether or not he will remain at the football club. There was a rumour going around yesterday that he'd been interviewed for the Blackburn job, the vacant Blackburn job. Now, I can confirm that as of yesterday, now that might have changed today. As I said, I haven't spoken to anybody regarding this today, but as of yesterday, that wasn't the case. Duncan Ferguson hadn't been interviewed for the Blackburn job. In fact, he hadn't even heard from Blackburn or spoken to Blackburn about the job. So, again, that was as of yesterday. That might have changed today. But as of yesterday, when the report was leaked, or when the report was put out there that Duncan had been interviewed for the Blackburn job, it was actually complete and utter nonsense. He hadn't been interviewed for the job at all, and they hadn't even contacted him regarding the job. So whether or not he is interviewed in due course, whether or not that is a situation in due course, we'll wait and see, but it certainly wasn't as of yesterday afternoon. As I said, we had the Richarlison stuff earlier on in the day. We also had a report from The Athletic, which was that Everton admire Brentford defender Christopher Aguerd, but his price tag could be an issue. Everton have also scouted Anderlecht defender Sergio Gomez, and Alexander Zinchenko has been touted to Newcastle and Everton. So, yeah, again, a couple of players there. Aguerd from Brentford, who I think is a good player, had a really good season at Celtic before signing for Brentford, and had a decent enough season last season. It's clear that Everton are in for a defender. The way I look at Aguerd is the way I look at Everton bringing in any defender this summer, and this might be a wrong way to look at it, but the way I look at Everton bringing in a defender this summer is that I'm thinking, are they as good and bring as much as what Yerry Mina brings to this Everton team? Because I think if Everton are to lose a centre-back this summer, and you might say, but Cam, it mightn't be a case of us losing a centre-back, it might just be a case of us bringing another one in. I don't think it will be. I think if we're to sign a centre-back, especially one that is on relatively big money, wage-wise and transfer fee-wise, then one of the current centre-backs is going to go, aren't they? Let's be honest. It's very unlikely to be Ben Godfrey, because he's not long signed, and again, I think he's in the plans for the future. It may be Mason Holgate, but I don't think Mason is deemed, when everybody's fit, as one of the best two centre-backs. It could be Michael Keane, but he's not long signed a new deal, and I don't think the club will get a ridiculous amount of money for him, and I think it's more than likely going to be Yerry Mina. There's certainly a decision to be made on Yerry Mina this summer. I think he's out of contract next summer. He has clearly got problems with injuries, problems that Everton can't really afford to facilitate. His wage is incredibly high for the injuries that he has, and listen, Yerry Mina, actually, surprisingly, over previous seasons, last season excluded, I think he's averaged something like 26 games out of 38, which isn't actually too bad in the time he's been at Everton. Last season was different because he had more of an injury record and he was out for longer. But the reality is the decision this summer is to either sell Yerry Mina or give him a new contract. And financially, given his injuries, given he's a year older, given his wage, do I see Everton giving Yerry Mina a new contract, especially if there is potential buyers there, and I'm not saying that there is, because we haven't heard anything and there's not been any rumours at the moment, but that might just be because Everton haven't made the decision on Yerry Mina's future. I think there would be potential buyers for Yerry Mina because of his quality, and because of his leadership and because of his personality and everything that he brings. And that, I suppose, is the biggest decision for Everton in regards to this situation, is can we afford to give Yerry Mina a new contract, given his injury problems and his age, but not his age, he's not particularly old, but the fact he's another year older. And if we don't, and we don't do that because we can't financially warrant it effectively, how do we replace somebody that, again, in a similar vein to Richarlison, is so important to Everton? Not only that, when he's on the field, he's the best centre-half at the club by a country mile, but also his personality off the field, his leadership, his desire, his ability to wind centre-forwards up, his ability to just be a dominant, big, tall, aggressive centre-half who, as I said, gives, centre-forwards as difficult a time as any other centre-half in the Premier League when he's on his day. And he's generally a good defender as well. He's not just somebody who gets in the ear. He's generally a good defender. He's a ball magnet, as I would say. How do we replace that? The personality thing is a big thing, because you might think, well, personality doesn't matter, Cam. It's about how good you are at football, but personality does matter. If you look at any of the tunnel vision videos that Everton have put out over the last 3 or 4 weeks, look at the one from the win against Palace. He's broken the tiles in the changing room and everyone's laughing. You look at a one from a couple of weeks ago, I don't know whether it was Chelsea, he's in the tunnel after the game shaking all the players. Now, he wasn't in the matchday squad for either of those games. Mightn't have been in the Chelsea game, actually. He's not in the matchday squad for either of those games, and yet he's still there in the dressing room, in the tunnel. He's still there celebrating with the players, hugging the players, showing his love and his affection. And again, you speak to anybody at Everton, Dan Donacci, who obviously recently left Everton, but he speaks ridiculously high of Yerry Mina and his personality and him as a human being and him as a person. You speak to anybody at Everton Football Club about Yerry Mina, and I can guarantee you that there isn't one person at Everton, player, staff, chef, steward, whoever it is, that hasn't had a pleasant experience with Yerry Mina and doesn't speak very highly of him. And that's difficult to replace, having that personality. But that also goes along with Yerry Mina being a leader on the pitch, one of the only leaders that we've got at the football club. Also goes alongside the fact that Yerry Mina is our best centre-half on his day when he's not injured. If Yerry Mina didn't have any injury issues, or had even half of the injury problems that he has, then I have no doubt he'd be the Everton captain, and he'd be a player that we wouldn't even be considering selling. He would be one of the few that would be in the range of don't even consider a bid for him. The reason as to why we're having this conversation is because of his injury problems. If he didn't have them, he'd be the Everton captain, and I don't think any Evertonian would want to get rid of him. But we're having this conversation because of the injury problems and because of our financial situation. And as I said, if he is to leave, then I think we've got to find somebody who can bring everything that Yerry Mina brings: the leadership, the desire, the commitment, the personality, the ability to get in the attacker's ears on the pitch, the ability to be a top quality defender. Do I think Aguirre is that? I don't. I think he's a good defender. I think he can do a job. I think he's decent enough. He's probably better than Michael Keane and Mason Holgate, and probably Ben Godfrey at this point. Is he as good as Yerry Mina? I don't think so. And if he's going to come in to swap with Yerry Mina, is he as big of a leader? I don't think so. And that's the same way I feel with James Tarkowski as well. I do think James Tarkowski's a leader. I think James Tarkowski's a good centre-half. But I don't want to be replacing Yerry Mina with Michael Keane, if that makes sense. And listen, Michael Keane has stepped himself up an awful lot over recent weeks, and towards the end of the season stepped himself up massively. The goal he scored against Crystal Palace was unbelievable. The first touch in the volley was fantastic. But let's be honest, his time at Everton has been extremely disappointing. He got a new 5-year deal off the basis that he had a good couple of months. He should never have got that deal. The majority of his time at Everton has been poor performance after poor performance. Now, I'm not comparing Tarkowski to Michael Keane, because I think Tarkowski's a better player than Michael Keane. But is he as good as Yerry Mina? I don't think so. And I don't want to replace Yerry Mina with somebody that isn't as good as Yerry Mina. Yerry Mina needs to be replaced by somebody who is effectively Yerry Mina without the injuries. And I know you could say, well, that's difficult to get, Cam, because they're some of the best centre-halves in the world, and Everton aren't going to attack those players. But there'll be players out there that can bring that are hidden gems effectively. Might be in the Championship, might be in the Portuguese leagues, might be in a league somewhere else in Europe, might be in the Premier League. Listen, James Tarkowski might come in and be a fantastic replacement for for Yerry Mina or Christoph. Ajer might do that as well, but I just don't have that feeling now. Plus, it all depends on that. His price tag is too heavy, isn't it? If his price tag is what's too heavy? Are they wanting 30 million for him? Are they wanting 40 million? Silly money. You know, we're not going to go there. If they're wanting 10, 15 million for him, then who knows? Tarkowski is very different because he's a free, and I would 100% take Tarkowski on a free because I think you would get. Listen, he's a free ultimately, and I know people will say, "Oh, but his wages this, his wages that," but I think that if the rumor was £90,000 a week, which I don't think is what we'd pay him, but let's say that was to be true, and he was given that for 3 years, I think that works out at something like £12 million or something like that. And I think over 3 years you would get more than a £12 million worth out of James Tarkowski. So I'd rather Tarkowski than Ajer, to be honest with you. But we'll wait and see. Sergio Gomez, I don't know an awful lot about. If I'm being honest with you, I don't watch the Belgium league whatsoever, so I can't sit here and give a massive in-depth review of him. But it's interesting to see Everton are still targeting centre-backs. And then Zinchenko, Reece says thoughts on Zinchenko, Cam. I like Zinchenko. Obviously, he's played at left-back for Manchester City a number of times. He's actually more of a midfielder, and he's played in midfield a number of times for Manchester City as well. I just think he would cost more money than what Everton would A, be willing to pay, and B, also need. I don't think we really need Alexander Zinchenko. Although he's a good player, he would come with the tax of being a Champions League player, being a multi-time Premier League winner, being an international. I think he might even be the captain in Ukraine. Correct me if I'm wrong. Being a player who's won multiple trophies, a player who's just been at the Champions, he would cost more money than I actually think it would be worth for him fitting in the team. And that's not me saying he's not a good player and he wouldn't improve Everton. I just don't really see what he improves drastically. For what he would cost. I honestly think he would cost upwards of £30-odd million, and I think for £30-odd million you could go and get a really good centre-half or a really good creative midfielder in there, which is something we desperately need, and Zinchenko isn't that, let's be honest. Or a really good centre forward if Dom's to leave, or add that to if depending on what Richarlison does, we might need to replace him. I just don't think Zinchenko is a necessary signing, to be honest with you. Anyway, let's get into some of the live comments then before we move on to Frank Lampard and the FA. Ryan says, hi mate, hope you're doing well. Thomas says, happening, Cam, what's happening, Thomas, my mate. Eugene says, Everton coach Duncan Ferguson not in talks with Blackburn. Yeah, just said that. David says, that sounds like a bit like he has plans to me. Well, I'm sure he does have plans, but whether those plans are to stay at Everton or whether those plans are to leave Everton are to be seen, but he definitely has plans, clearly. Reece says he wants the board to match his ambition or he's gone. I reckon Cam will wait and see. Liam says, I'd be genuinely upset if Richie left. I've never loved the player as much as since Bainesy and Cahill. He loves Everton so much and has never given up, always fights, deserves the best, and wish him that. I'd absolutely love him to stay. Yeah, and I think that's how a lot of Evertonians, including myself, are feeling. Liam says, I honestly think DCL is off to Arsenal and Richie will grace the hollow turf at Goodison next season. I'm judging by what Frank said last week. I think he wants some early business done. Maybe. Listen, Dom has obviously not been linked away with anybody yet. And there was rumours not so long ago that Arsenal weren't interested in Dominic Calvert-Lewin anymore, so we'll wait and see on that one. If you are enjoying, by the way, please hit that like button. 130 people watching. If you could get the likes up, that would be amazing. If you are new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe. We will be doing these news videos, talking rubbish transfer shows. We'll be doing these quite frequently. Maybe even I don't want to commit to one a day, but if there's enough news, then we might do one a day, one every other day, even if it's just a video and not a live stream, and we do it alongside whatever other live stream we're doing. So for example, tomorrow we will be doing a seasonal player ratings where we go through every player and we talk about, give them a rating from 1 to 10 for the season. But if there's a bit more news, if there's a bit more sort of gossip, then I might just do a separate little video, 10-15 minute video where we talk about that news as well, so we can get it out there. But we can also get the seasonal player ratings out there as well, because I don't think these rumours and this news is going to quieten down anytime soon, to be honest with you. Mark says, please, we must not sell Ellis Sims, we have to keep him. I don't think we'll sell Ellis Sims. But I might be wrong. Depends if we get a bid for him, don't we? Listen, if Hearts or somebody in the Scottish League come in with a £10 million bid for Ellis Sims and Everton don't deem don't deem Ellis Sims good enough to be a Premier League squad player as of now, then I think Everton would sell, and I don't think that's particularly awful business, to be honest with you, because Ellis Sims is at an age where if he's going to be a Premier League player, he will be at that age now, and if he isn't, then we may as well make money on him. This is something Everton have failed to do in years previous. Keep young players on, give them contracts because of the thought that they might make it, and then when they don't make it, we let them go on a free when we could have sold them for some money years prior. Loads of the best recruiting teams in the world in this country sell their young players on, and people are scratching their heads thinking, oh my god, they're amazing. Look at them lot. I hate comparing us to them lot, but the way them lot have done their business with their young players in the past few years has been unbelievable. They brought Ryan Brewster in. They convinced everyone he was the best player in the world. They sold him for what, 20 or 30 million pounds, and he's fucking shite. They've done it with Jordan Ibe, they've done it with Dominic Solanke. They've made about 100 million pounds on young players that aren't very good, but they've convinced people that they are very good, and they've sold them at the right times. And when they sold them, people went, what are you doing that for? He's going to be amazing, he's going to be world class. And these players have gone on to do nothing. And granted, okay, Brewster's still young, but Solanke and Ibe's terms, these are players that are in their mid-20s, getting towards the 30s now, and they've done nothing, and they were sold for big money from Liverpool. And when they were sold, people went, hang on, what are they selling them for? They've got potential. They went on to do nothing, and Liverpool have made a ridiculous amount of money from them. So this is where Everton have to start being a little bit cutthroat with some of our younger players. If there's a bid there and there's money there on the table, and we've identified that these players aren't going to make it, if they're going to make it, then fine. Not saying sell a Lewis Dobbin or whatever. If you look at these players, and you know, if Frank Lampard and Everton and Kevin Thelwell look at Ellis Sims and think he's going to be a player in the near future, he's going to be one for the Premier League, then that's fine, keep him. But they might be looking at Ellis Sims thinking, at his age now, where his progress is, he's not gonna get to the Premier League level. Certainly not anytime soon. So we'll take the money for him. Ultimately, that's what business is. And I know he's had a great spell at Hearts and he's done really, really well. And listen, Ellis Sims might be a part of the squad next season. And he might be fantastic. We'll wait and see. But I think, look at Nathan Broadhead, for example. He's just been given a new contract and he's had a great season at Sunderland, which we might make some money back on him. But luckily for us, that's happened. Otherwise, he'd have gone effectively for nothing. At the end of his contract. Pardon me. Stephen says if he does go, it needs to be at 100 million at least. Other teams get top dollar for players not as good. Liam says, let's get our likes in Blues. Nice one, Liam. David says, is it possible that he could also weigh in on future signings that complement his role? Richarlison, are you talking about? I don't think he'd have that much power. I don't think he'd be given that much power, but that might be one of his things. He might be saying, listen, I want to know who we're bringing in so I can see where and which that leaves me. We don't know, do we? We don't know. We'll wait and see. I'm with you, lad, says Liam. Philip says, if we want to progress from last season, the disaster, selling our best players is stupid. I'm not too worried about TCL, but the likes of Richie and Jordan would be hard to replace. They would. How are we, Cam, says Carter? I'm not too bad. And Anis says, I'd take Dennis from Watford. Yeah, he's one of them at Watford that I wouldn't mind bringing in. They'd probably want big money for him, even though they've just gone down. But listen, there's a couple of players from those relegated teams that I'd be looking at and maybe thinking about, throwing a little bid in there for or testing the water. But there's loads of players from the Championship as well that we should be doing that with. So we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see, won't we? Anyway, let's get into the FA statement regarding Frank Lampard. So the FA released a statement earlier today saying an independent regulatory commission has fined Frank Lampard £30,000 after finding a charge against him for breaching FA Rule E3 in relation to media comments proven during a personal hearing. The Everton FC manager made the comments after their Premier League game against Liverpool FC on Sunday the 24th of April 2022, and he denied that they constitute improper conduct as they imply bias and or attack the integrity of the match referee, pardon me, or referees in general, and or bring the game into disrepute, contrary to FA Rule E3.1. Now, if you're wondering what this is about or what this is referencing to, I believe it's referencing to Frank Lampard coming out after the Merseyside derby, talking about the Anthony Gordon penalty decision, and I think he said something along the lines of, if that's at the other end or if that's on Mohamed Salah, it's given as a penalty, and the FA weren't happy with that, and the FA genuinely weren't happy at the fact that Frank Lampard has stood up against these idiots of officials. And as I said earlier, it's just baffling, really, isn't it? I'm about to drink cold tea, by the way, which I think is disgusting, but I need to get some form of liquid in my throat. That sounded a bit mad. That is vile. That is absolutely vile. Yeah. It baffles me, and as soon as I seen this today, and as soon as I read the statement, and as soon as I seen the news and the reports, I sort of just, again, it made me further fall out of love with football, because it made me further realise that there's just so many things that happen in football that are just complete and utter nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense, and this is one of them. You know, Frank Lampard, okay, he's come out and said that if it's given at the other end, it's a penalty, but what he said is the truth. Absolutely the truth. And there's evidence to back up that there's ex-referees, there's people that have worked closely to the Premier League that have openly come out, you know, post-retirement and whatever, written books, done interviews, saying things like, you know, if there's a decision at Anfield, you know, and you're not really sure which way it's supposed to go, you give it to Liverpool. Or if a player goes down in the box at Anfield in the last 10 minutes and Liverpool aren't winning, you know, it's a penalty to Liverpool. These are things that have been open. You know, these are ex-referees. These are people that have worked close to the Premier League that have released this information in the in the media. It's there to be seen. You can Google it. You can read these books. You can see these interviews. So what Frank Lampard said, I believe, he believes, and I think 99.9% of Evertonians believe to be the truth. And I still, to this day, they want to fine me 30 grand, they can. I haven't got it to pay it, so I won't be paying it. But I still believe to this day that if the push on Anthony Gordon was on Mohamed Salah at the other end of the pitch, bearing in mind at this point in the game, Liverpool was struggling to break Everton down. We're getting really frustrated. Should have had Sadio Mane sent off for headbutting about 3 people. If that was in the other box and that was on a Liverpool player, it would have been given. It's as simple as that. So what Frank said was the truth. But this goes back to this point that I made earlier of referees being untouchable and not being allowed to be criticised and not being allowed to have a bad word said about them, which is nonsense, because in every walk of life you are criticised. You know, be it rightly or wrongly, you are criticised for what you do. In work environments, everybody is criticised. There's not one job on this planet that, if it's not done correctly by the person that is assigned to do it correctly, there's not one job that they won't be criticised for not doing it correctly for. It's as simple as that. If I don't do my job correctly, I'm criticised. If David or Harold or Richo or Eugene or Sean or Bake Toffee or Tom, Nathan don't do their job correctly, they are criticised, because that's the world we live in. If you don't do something the way you're meant to do it, you are criticised for it. It's not always aggressive criticism. Sometimes it's constructive criticism. Sometimes it's advice. But there's criticism there. That is the world we live in. If footballers don't do their job properly, they are criticised, and more often than not, scrutinised in newspapers, in media, in the news, in punditry. If we can't criticise people, then get rid of Roy Keane, get rid of Jamie Carragher, get rid of Gary Neville, get rid of Micah Richards, get rid of all of those pundits that sit there and talk about games, because we're not allowed to criticise people. We're not allowed to criticise players. We're not allowed to criticise managers. Managers are criticised for decisions they make. They're sacked because they're criticised about the way they've managed the football club. Yeah, the moment a referee is criticised, the FA are like, whoa, you can't do that. You can't say he's shite, or you can't say it's a little bit suspicious that he made that decision. You're not allowed to say that. You're getting fined 30 grand. You're getting fined this. You're getting fined that. It's fucking nonsense. It's fucking nonsense. And yet there's this big thing of respect the referees. I was always taught growing up that respect is earned. You have to earn people's respect, and people should earn your respect. And whilst you should respect people, if they don't respect you, then, you know, ultimately it's your choice then to not respect them. And I don't respect the referees' decisions, because I think referees' decisions are based out of bias. And I think when they get them wrong, they don't have the fucking bollocks to stand up and say, do you know what, I got that wrong there, I apologise. They hide behind, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. So you're not getting any of my respect, because you haven't earned my respect. And again, it goes back to this. You're not allowed to criticise referees. You're not allowed to say a bad word about them. Why aren't referees doing interviews after games? Why aren't they obliged to stand in front of a camera and explain, why did you make this decision? Why did you make that decision? If anybody watched the Champions League final on Saturday night, Real Madrid were disallowed one of the most blatant, obvious goals I've ever seen in my life. A ball had hit two Liverpool players and fell to Karim Benzema, who put it in the back of the net, and it was deemed offside. It was deemed offside because it wasn't an intentional ball by the Liverpool player. But as I think Rory Jennings said in his video, a Liverpool player or a Real Madrid player or any player would never intentionally pass it to an opposition player. So there will never be an intentional ball played by an opposition player to an opposition player, because why would they intentionally do that? That would be match fixing. So the rule should be, and I think probably is, that if a ball comes off of an opposition player and falls to you, the offside rule is then void, especially if it comes off two opposition players. If it's a deflection, that's different. This was a Liverpool kicked, I think it was Van Dijk or Matic or Kunate, whoever it was, volleyed the ball onto Fabinho and it then went to Benzema. It should have stood. It was a blatant goal. And Peter Walton was on BT at half time trying to explain the decision and was stumbling over his words trying to explain why the referee had made the right decision. And I think even Rio Ferdinand effectively looked as if to say, Peter, you're talking shite. You don't even believe the words that are coming out of your mouth. You could see on Peter Walton's face, he was almost, he was talking as if he was thinking, I know, I don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about here, because I don't see why that's not being given as a goal. And this goes back to it again. People like Peter Walton and Dermot Gallagher, when they come on these shows and they're asked to talk about refereeing decisions, they never disagree with the referee. They never say, oh, he's got that one wrong there. It's always, oh yeah, he got it right. He got it right because of this, he got it right because of that. And that one on Saturday is hilarious. Go and watch Peter Walton's reaction to it, because he says, yeah, he's got that right there. And then BT ask him to explain it, and he's effectively juttering over his words as if he's thinking, I haven't got a fucking clue what I meant to say here because it's wrong. And the whole panel almost look as if to say it when he stopped speaking. You were talking fucking shite there, Peter. And again, why wasn't the referee? And I know, obviously, to Real Madrid, it ultimately meant nothing because they went on to win the game anyway. But why wasn't the referee asked at the end of the game? Why wasn't that decision given? Or why was the VAR not asked? The VAR official, why did you take so long on that, and why wasn't it given? Why aren't referees accountable for their mistakes? Because if a referee was accountable to their mistakes, you wouldn't get managers feeling the need to come out and confront them, feeling the need to come out and, criticise them, because you would have had a referee coming out and saying, yeah, I got that one wrong there, or I didn't deem that this, or I didn't deem that. But they haven't even got the bollocks to come out and explain the decisions, which is what makes me believe that there's something else in it other than just, no, I got that wrong. But if you got it wrong, then grow up, come out and say, I got that wrong. That was the wrong decision. My view was struck, or, again, there's no excuse for getting it wrong in this day and age because of VAR. You cannot get a decision wrong in football nowadays. You can't get a decision wrong. Our on-field referee can, because a player might be blocking his view, or it might have happened too quick, or he might have been preoccupied. But VAR means that a decision cannot be wrong. There is no reason why Rodri's handball, why Anthony Gordon's penalty, why Jordan Ayew's challenge against Palace, why Benzema's goal the other day, other examples for other teams across the world, there's no reason why these decisions are wrong. Because there's people watching them on a television screen that know what decision has to be made and still don't give that decision. So, the FA are nonsense. They're a bunch of absolute knobheads. There's a lot of talk about UEFA at the moment being dickheads, and I agree with that. UEFA are a bunch of knobheads as well, but the FA are exactly the same. They're a bunch of absolute fucking idiots. And this Frank Lampard situation is ridiculous. They're fining a manager for coming out and calling out a referee on a decision that was blatantly biased. Simple as that. And they fined them 30 grand for saying that, for saying the truth. Because you're not allowed to question referees. You're not allowed to say a bad word about them. Why? Well, why are the media allowed to say a bad word about players then? Why are they allowed to say a bad word about managers? Why are they allowed to say a bad word about boards of football clubs? Why are they allowed to say a bad word about fans? Why are referees the only people within football that we're not allowed to say a bad word about and we're not allowed to question? Why is that the case? Why are they the only people within football that aren't interviewed or aren't spoken to or aren't asked about the decisions they made? Managers have a press conference every week where they're scrutinised on decisions that they make. Players come out and are scrutinised in newspapers, in articles, have interviews after games about the decisions they make. Why don't referees? Nonsense, absolute nonsense. But anyway, Frank Lampard has been fined £30,000 after an independent regulatory commission charged him for breaching FA Rule E3 in relation to media comments proven during a hearing. I don't know who the independent regulatory body was. I assume it was Mike Dean, Kevin Friend and John Moss, but there you go. Yeah, that's pretty much it for all of the news. Everton Till I Die says, please go all out for Conor Gallagher. Incessant Everton Till I Die also says up the effing Toffees. Goodison Gang says at least Madrid won. I don't care what happened in the game. I was just using that. I'm not even talking about the game. The game's got nothing to do with Everton and has very little relevance to Everton. I don't care about it. I was talking about, again, a decision that was made which is just nonsense, and the fact that a referee tried to back that decision and he couldn't even. You could see in his face he didn't even believe in himself. Harold says the fines given to managers are way too excessive. They're turning it into a business. Well, it is a business, isn't it? Jonah says on the Lampard fine, the board should pay his fine on Richarlison if he goes. Same with Dom. At least it will give us much needed funds to pump back in the squad. I actually agree with the board paying Lampard's fine thing, to be honest with you. Eugene says Everton reached Bramley-Moore Doc milestone. Yes. And Nathan said I'd offer Richie a new contract and sell DCL, but I think Richie will go, unfortunately. Well, let's hope not. And Tom also says, Cam, even it makes you think Big Duncan's getting shipped out. From what I know, as of now, nothing has changed in the Duncan Ferguson situation at Everton. Again, whether or not it does over the next few weeks, we'll wait and see. But as of yesterday, he hadn't even been approached by Blackburn. Never mind, interviewed by them. But we'll wait and see on that one. Anyway, look, we are going to finish it up there then. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. As I said, we will be back tomorrow with the season player rating, so don't forget to look out for those. And if there's any other news out today, we'll do a little video talking about that as well. Massive thank you to everybody for watching the live comments. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching the YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new as well. Let me know your thoughts on Richarlison. Let me know your thoughts on Frank Lampard's fine as well. But yeah, big thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. And we'll see you soon on the Mighty Blues. Cheers for watching. See you after.